The giant meeting hall of the Galactic Council felt heavy with worry. Admiral Kang stood in front of massive floating screens that showed pictures and data from across the galaxy. His 4 eyes moved quickly as he looked at report after report. Each one told the same scary story. "Look at this," Admiral Kang said, pointing at the glowing display. "The Vorthan Empire sent their best war fleet to attack Earth 3 years ago. 500 ships all gone. No messages, no survivors found floating in space, nothing." Dr. Park, a scientist with green skin and tentacles instead of arms, moved closer to the screens. She had been studying this mystery for months. "It gets worse," she said, her voice shaking a little. "The crystalline hegemony tried next. They sent 1,000 crystal ships that could cut through metal like paper. They also disappeared completely." The other council members started talking loudly, among themselves. Some looked scared, others looked angry. A few looked like they didn't believe what they were hearing. 47 different alien civilizations have tried to attack or conquer Earth, Dr. Park continued, making the room go quiet again. Some were small raiding parties with just 10 ships. Others were massive invasion fleets with millions of soldiers. It doesn't matter how big or small they were. They all vanished without sending even one distress signal back home. Commander Roth, a tall alien with blue skin and sharp teeth, stood up from his seat. He was known throughout the galaxy as one of the best military leaders alive. His people, the Nexus fleet, had conquered more planets than anyone else. He started laughing, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh that meant he thought everyone else was being stupid. "You're all acting like scared children," Roth said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Humans are primitives. They still use chemical rockets to barely reach their own moon. My great-grandfather was conquering entire star systems when these humans were still living in caves and hunting animals with pointed sticks." Dr. Park shook her head. "Commander Roth, I've spent 2 years studying every piece of information we have about Earth and humans. The data shows something very strange, something that doesn't match what we think we know about them." "What kind of strange?" asked Council Leader Thane, an old alien who had lived for over 500 years. Dr. Park touched the control panel and new images appeared on the screens. They showed Earth from space, looking small and blue and peaceful. "Every time a fleet approaches Earth, the same thing happens. The human ships come out to meet them. These ships look old and weak, like they were built from scrap metal. But then," she paused and showed videos from the few long-distance cameras that had recorded the beginnings of some battles. "The human ships fight in ways that make no sense. They use tactics that shouldn't work. They seem to know exactly what their enemies are going to do before they do it. And then, after a few hours or days, all communication stops. The attacking fleet just disappears." Commander Roth slammed his fist on the table. "Enough of this nonsense. Humans are weak. Their technology is hundreds of years behind ours. There has to be another explanation. Maybe these fleets were destroyed by space storms or black holes." "We checked that," Dr. Park said quietly. "The space around Earth is perfectly safe. No dangerous cosmic events. No hidden weapons platforms. Just humans." The room got very quiet. Everyone was thinking about what this meant. If humans were really just primitive people with simple technology, how were they making entire fleets disappear? "I think," Dr. Park said slowly, "that humans have some kind of ability that we don't understand. Something that goes beyond normal. Fighting and weapons." Commander Roth stood up so fast that his chair fell over. "I've heard enough of this foolishness. The Nexus fleet will show you all how to deal with primitive humans. We'll bring back proof of human weakness for everyone to see." "Commander, please reconsider," Dr. Park said, worry clear in her voice. "Something is happening on Earth that we don't understand. Maybe we should try talking to the humans instead of attacking them." But Roth was already walking toward the door. "My fleet leaves for Earth tomorrow. We'll solve this mystery once and for all. When we return with human prisoners and their planet under our control, you'll all see how wrong you were." Dr. Park watched him leave and felt a cold fear in her stomach. She looked at her data one more time, hoping she had missed something that would explain the mystery. But the numbers didn't lie. 47 civilizations had tried to attack Earth. 47 civilizations had vanished completely. Soon it would be 48. The space around Earth suddenly filled with bright flashes of light as hundreds of Nexus warships appeared out of hyperspace. Commander Roth stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking out through the massive viewing window at the small blue planet below. He had expected to see huge space stations bristling with weapons, or at least some kind of proper military defense grid. Instead, what he saw made him laugh out loud. "Are you seeing this?" Roth asked his second-in-command, pointing at the human ships that were slowly moving toward them. "Look at those pathetic vessels. They look like someone took random pieces of metal and welded them together in their backyard, the E." Human ships were indeed a strange sight. Some looked like old cargo haulers, with extra armor plates stuck on the sides. Others appeared to be passenger ships with weapons mounted wherever there was room. A few looked like they had been built from the remains of completely different types of spacecraft, all mixed together in ways that shouldn't have worked. "Sir," said Lieutenant Vex, the ship's communication officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet." "Put it through," Roth commanded, straightening his uniform. He wanted to look proper when he accepted the human's surrender. The main screen flickered, and the face of a human appeared. Captain Lee looked to be middle-aged, with calm, dark eyes and graying hair. He didn't look scared or worried at all, which surprised Roth. Most species begged for mercy when they saw the size of a Nexus invasion fleet. "Nexus fleet," Captain Lee said, his voice steady and polite. "You are entering restricted space around Earth. I'm asking you to please turn your ships around and leave our system now. This is your only warning." The bridge of Roth's ship went completely silent. Then, slowly, Roth began to smile. It wasn't a nice smile. "Human," Roth said, leaning forward in his command chair. "My name is Commander Roth of the Nexus Fleet. I have 800 warships under my command. Each one of my ships could destroy your entire pathetic fleet by itself. You have exactly 1 minute to surrender your planet to me, or we will take it by force." Captain Lee was quiet for a moment, and Roth thought he saw something sad pass across the human's face. When Lee spoke again, his voice was even gentler than before. "Commander Roth, I can see that you've already made your decision. I'm truly sorry that you've chosen this path. I wish there was another way." "Surrender now or be destroyed," Roth growled, his patience running out. "I'm sorry," Captain Lee repeated, and then the transmission ended. Roth laughed and turned to his weapons officer. "Did you hear that? He's sorry. These humans are even more pathetic than I thought. Begin the attack. Send the first wave of fighters. Let's show these primitives what real military power looks like." 50 of the Nexus fleet's best fighter ships shot forward toward the human vessels. These fighters were fast, deadly, and piloted by some of the best warriors in the galaxy. Each one was armed with plasma cannons that could cut through the strongest armor, and their shields could protect them from almost any weapon. Roth expected the human ships to either run away or be destroyed within minutes. What happened next made no sense at all. The human ships moved in ways that seemed impossible. They were too slow to outrun the Nexus fighters, but somehow they were always in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. When a Nexus fighter fired its weapons, the human ship it was aiming at had already moved out of the way, as if the pilot had known the attack was coming before it happened. "How are they doing that?" shouted Lieutenant Vex, staring at his sensor readings. "Our fighters are faster and more maneuverable, but the humans are flying like they can see the future." But it got stranger. The human ships weren't just avoiding attacks. They were fighting back in ways that made Roth's head spin. A rusty-looking human cargo ship somehow got behind 3 Nexus fighters and disabled all of them with some kind of energy weapon that his sensors couldn't even identify. Another human vessel that looked like it was held together with tape and hope managed to trap 5 fighters in what appeared to be some kind of gravity net. "This is impossible," Roth muttered, watching his advanced fighters being outfought by ships that looked like flying junk piles. "Our technology is centuries ahead of theirs. How are they doing this?" Within 10 minutes, half of his first wave was either destroyed or disabled. The other half was retreating back to the main fleet, and Roth could hear the panic in his pilots' voices over the radio. "Sir," called out his tactical officer, "the human ships are moving into attack formation. They're coming toward us." Roth looked at the screen and felt something he hadn't experienced in years: fear. The human ships were approaching his massive fleet, and somehow, despite everything he knew about warfare and technology, he wasn't sure his forces could win. The moment. everything changed. Commander Roth braced himself for the worst as the docking clamps secured the human vessel to his damaged flagship. His bridge crew, those who had survived the impossible battle, gathered around him with weapons drawn. They expected boarding parties of human soldiers to come streaming through the airlocks, ready to finish what the space battle had started. The sound of the airlock cycling open echoed through the damaged ship like a death knell. Roth's officers, tensed, fingers hovering over triggers, prepared to make their final stand against the conquering humans. But what emerged from the connecting tunnel wasn't what any of them had expected. Instead of armed warriors in battle gear, the first figures, through the airlock, carried medical supplies and emergency equipment. They moved with the practiced efficiency of rescue workers, not the aggressive swagger of conquerors. Behind them came individuals carrying translation devices and what appeared to be food and water supplies. Captain Lee stepped forward, and Roth was struck by how ordinary the human looked. After witnessing the devastating effectiveness of Earth's fleet, he had expected their commander to be some kind of superhuman warrior. Instead, he saw a middle-aged person with kind eyes and calloused hands, someone who looked more like a teacher or engineer than a military leader. "Welcome to the Sol Defense Force," Lee said, extending his hand toward the bewildered alien commander. The gesture was so unexpected, so completely opposite to what Roth had anticipated, that he simply stared at the offered hand without moving. The humans weren't behaving like victorious conquerors at all. They were treating the defeated Nexus crew like guests rather than prisoners. Medical personnel were already moving through the damaged ship, tending to wounded alien soldiers without any apparent concern for their own safety. But it was the figure who stepped forward next that truly shattered Roth's understanding of reality. The being's crystalline features were unmistakably from the hegemony, the same species that Roth belonged to, the same people who had sent this very fleet to conquer Earth. Yet here was one of his own kind, wearing the uniform of Earth's defense force. "I was in your position 30 years ago," Admiral Vextar explained, his crystal-like skin catching the light from the damaged bridge displays. "I came here leading a fleet twice the size of yours, absolutely convinced that humans were a primitive species that needed to be brought under proper hegemony control." Roth's mind reeled as he tried to process what he was seeing. This wasn't possible. The hegemony's historical records showed that the previous expedition to Earth had been completely destroyed. There were no survivors, no prisoners taken, no diplomatic contact established. The fleet had simply vanished without a trace. "The Third Hegemony Expeditionary Fleet," Roth whispered, recognition dawning in his eyes. "You were reported as total losses. Command assumed you had been annihilated by some kind of human superweapon." Admiral Vexistar's expression grew thoughtful, tinged with what might have been regret. "In a way, we were destroyed. The fleet that arrived at Earth 30 years ago, full of arrogance and certainty about human inferiority, ceased to exist the moment we understood what we were really facing." He gestured toward the human medical teams who were working alongside beings from a dozen different species to repair the Nexus ship's critical systems. What destroyed us wasn't weapons or technology. It was discovering that everything we believed about humans was wrong. As Roth looked around his damaged bridge, he began to notice details that had escaped his attention during the shock of defeat. The rescue workers weren't all human. In fact, most of them weren't human at all. He saw Vothan engineers working on his ship's power systems, crystalline medics treating his wounded crew, and plasma-form technicians repairing his communications. Faray. These were species that should have been enemies of each other, civilizations that had been locked in conflicts for centuries. Yet here they worked together with a coordination and trust that seemed impossible. They moved like parts of a single organism, each species contributing their unique strengths to solve problems collectively. "The fleet that attacked you wasn't human," Admiral Vextar continued, watching as understanding slowly dawned in Roth's eyes. "It was all of us, every species that has ever come to Earth with conquest in mind. Hegemony forces, Vorthan war fleets, Nexus armadas, even Void Hunter, raiding parties. We're all here now, serving together under one banner." The truth hit Roth like a physical blow, leaving him struggling to breathe. Earth's incredible military might, their impossible knowledge of alien tactics, their devastating effectiveness in battle, it all made sense now. They weren't fighting human ships at all. They had been defeated by their own people, by fleets from their own civilizations who had somehow been turned against their homeworlds. "You collect us," Roth whispered, his voice barely audible above the sound of repair work happening throughout his ship. The words carried the weight of horrified realization. Earth wasn't just defending itself, it was systematically converting its attackers into defenders. Captain Lee's expression remained gentle, but there was a steel underneath that reminded Roth of the devastating efficiency he had witnessed during the battle. "We offer you a choice," the human corrected softly, "the same choice we've offered to every fleet that has ever arrived here with hostile intentions." The choice wasn't between life and death, Roth realized. It was between continuing to serve the narrow interests of individual species, perpetuating the conflicts and competitions that kept the galaxy fractured, or joining something larger, something that transcended the tribal boundaries that had defined galactic politics for millennia. "Your crews are being treated for their injuries," Captain Lee continued. "Your ships are being repaired. When you're ready, you're free to return to Nexus space and report what you've found here. Or you can stay and help us prepare for the next fleet that arrives with conquest in mind." Looking around at his crew, Roth saw the same stunned realization in their eyes. They had come to Earth expecting to find a primitive species ripe for conquest. Instead, they had discovered something that challenged every assumption about how civilizations interact with each other. The humans hadn't defeated them through superior firepower or advanced technology. They had won by offering something that none of their attackers had ever experienced before: the chance to be part of something greater than themselves. For the first time in his military career, Commander Roth found himself facing a choice that would define not just his own future, but the future of everyone under his command. The decision that changed everything. The truth about Earth's defenders spread through the Nexus fleet like a wildfire that couldn't be contained. Ship by ship, crew by crew, the stunning revelation rippled outward from Commander Roth's flagship to every vessel in the massive armada. What had started as whispered conversations between confused officers quickly became fleet-wide communications as the impossible reality became undeniable. Captain Zara, commanding one of the heavy assault cruisers, was among the first to understand what she was seeing. Through her ship's observation screens, she watched as repair crews worked on damaged Nexus vessels. But these weren't human repair teams. They were Nexus engineers, wearing Earth's insignia, working alongside beings from dozens of other species to fix the very ships that had come to destroy their new home. "That's Lieutenant Commander Thex," her communications officer whispered, pointing at one of the figures coordinating repairs on a nearby vessel. "He was reported killed in action during the third Nexus expedition 15 years ago. How is he here? How is he alive and working with the humans?" The questions multiplied as more familiar faces appeared on their screens. Officers who had been declared dead, entire crews that had vanished without a trace, ship captains who had been memorialized as heroes lost in the line of duty. All of them were here, alive and working together with an efficiency that defied explanation. Across the fleet, weapons systems that had been primed for a final desperate battle began powering down, not because of orders from command, but because individual crews were making their own decisions as they recognized friends, family members, and former comrades among Earth's defenders. The bridge of the dreadnought Sovereign fell silent as Captain C. Cato stared at the communication screen, displaying a message from someone who should have been impossible to contact. "This is Admiral Chendar of the Sol Defense Force," came the voice of his own brother, who had disappeared during a reconnaissance mission to Earth 5 years earlier. "Stand down your weapons, Cato. Let me explain what's really happening here." But not everyone was ready to accept what they were seeing. Commander Thane, one of Roth's most loyal officers and a hardline believer in Nexus superiority, refused to accept that their entire understanding of the galaxy had been wrong. From his HFY's position commanding a squadron of fast attack ships, he watched the growing confusion in the fleet with mounting rage. "This is some kind of trick," he broadcast to his squadron. The humans are using mind control or advanced holographic deception. Those aren't really our people. They're imitations designed to weaken our resolve. Thane's ships broke formation and launched a desperate assault on the nearest Earth vessel, their weapons blazing as they tried to prove that the human defenders were as vulnerable as any other enemy. But the ships that moved to intercept them weren't crewed by humans at all. 3 Nexus heavy fighters, identical to Thane's own vessels except for the Earth insignia on their hulls, positioned themselves between the attackers and their target. The lead pilot's voice came through on an emergency frequency, and Thane recognized it immediately. It was Commander Voss, his own former wingman, who had been lost during a patrol mission 2 years ago. "Stand down, Thane," Voss ordered, his voice carrying the same authority it had possessed when they had served together. "You're attacking people who want to help you, people who understand exactly what you're going through right now." The brief firefight that followed was more tragic than violent. Thane's squadron found themselves outmaneuvered not by superior alien technology, but by pilots who knew their tactics intimately because they had learned those same tactics in the same training academies under the same instructors. The battle ended when Thane's ship was disabled rather than destroyed, captured by former comrades who refused to let him throw his life away in pointless defiance. Similar scenes played out across the fleet as die-hard believers in their species. Superiority launched futile attacks, only to be stopped by their own people who had found something worth protecting. Each attempted assault was met not with devastating retaliation, but with the measured response of defenders who understood their attackers' motivations because they had once shared them. Dr. Park arrived with the Council observation fleet expecting to find the aftermath of a massive battle. Her ships had detected the energy signatures of what should have been a devastating conflict, the kind of space engagement that would leave debris scattered across multiple star systems. Instead, she found something that challenged every assumption about how interstellar conflicts were supposed to end. The Nexus fleet was intact, their ships being repaired by crews that seemed to include representatives from every major galactic civilization. There were no prisoners being marched away in chains, no victorious humans claiming territory or demanding tribute. Instead, there was something that looked almost like a peaceful first contact scenario, if first contact could involve thousands of warships. Admiral Roth, now wearing Earth's insignia alongside his original Nexus rank insignia, addressed not just his own fleet, but the entire galaxy through the Council's observation vessels. His words would be replayed countless times in the years that followed, becoming one of the most important speeches in galactic history. "For generations, we've measured our strength by what we could destroy," Roth began, his voice carrying across the communication networks of dozens of species. "We've competed to see who could build the most powerful weapons, who could conquer the most territory, who could force the most worlds to submit to our will." He paused, looking out at the mixed crews working together to repair ships that had been enemies just hours before. "The humans taught us something we never learned in all our centuries of conquest, that true strength doesn't come from what you can destroy, but from what you choose to protect together." The implications of his words rippled through the watching fleets. Earth hadn't just defeated another invasion, they had solved the galaxy's greatest mystery. For decades, civilizations had wondered what happened to the fleets that attacked the human homeworld. Ships would depart with great fanfare and detailed mission plans, only to vanish completely without sending so much as a final transmission. Now the truth was clear. No one returned from attacking Earth because Earth didn't create prisoners of war. They didn't destroy their enemies or force them into submission. Instead, they offered something that most galactic civilizations had never experienced: a chance to belong to something larger than themselves, something worth protecting rather than conquering. The choice that each crew member had to make was simple in concept, but revolutionary in its implications. They could return to their homeworlds and continue the endless cycle of competition and conflict that had defined galactic politics for millennia. Or they could stay and help build something new, a community where strength came from cooperation rather than domination, where different species worked together rather than against each other. As the days passed and more ships chose to join, Earth's defenders rather than return home, it became clear that humanity had accomplished something unprecedented in galactic history. They had turned their greatest weakness, being constantly attacked by superior forces, into their greatest strength by transforming enemies into allies, one fleet at a time.